Thank you for joining the ACA Small Business Bootcamp. I'm Robert Theobald, Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services, and we are excited to have you here with us on this Tuesday morning, June 1st. I can't believe it's June already. I hope everybody had a great Memorial Day and they were able to enjoy and celebrate the holiday. We want to start by thanking all of our community partners. We could not do these bootcamp sessions without them, their expertise, their time, and their effort. So we'd like to thank them and appreciate them very much for their participation. So the Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses come out of the COVID crisis stronger than ever. It's a statewide initiative supported by our community partners. And not only is it a boot camp, but it is a resource collective and a content library. So on the Small Business Bootcamp website, you'll find the links to register for upcoming sessions. You most likely went to that web page to sign up for today's session. Further down on the website, on that web page, you can find the link to the Resource Collective, and then you'll also find the archive, which is a massive content library. We started the boot camp in April of 2020 and have been doing at minimum 2 sessions per week since then, and have over 140 sessions recorded and available to you at no cost to go back and review at any time, along with their corresponding slide decks and any other materials that those experts may have provided. So it's a great resource to take a look at. As I mentioned, we also have our Resource Collective, and the Resource Collective are the tools and guides that have been provided by our community partners to help support small businesses through the COVID crisis. A lot of great information. Here are some samples of those guides and resources you can find on the Resource Collective. We cover all kinds of different industries and topics, so it's another great resource and tool for your small business. Another great website is the ACA's COVID-19 Arizona Business Resources website. And on this website, you can find business guidance and financial information with the financial grants and loan programs that are out there at the local, state, and federal levels. That information is constantly being updated as new information comes out for all those different programs. Additionally, the ACA has a number of programs to help support small business owners. Our small business services can help support small businesses. They work with the SBA or need to work with the small business development centers known as the SBDC, or with SCORE or other no-cost business service providers. We can help support working through, as you work with local banking contacts or lending contacts, we can match you up with those lenders. Additionally, our workforce division can work with employers that are looking to hire new staff or train and upskill their employees. They have programs for that. And our Arizona MEP works with small to medium-sized manufacturers throughout the state to help them with all of their needs. And we also have our small business checklist. At this time, a lot of people are looking to start their own small business or expand their small business with additional product lines. And the Small Business Checklist is an online interactive tool that can help small businesses identify the licensing, registration, and compliance needs at the local, state, and federal level. And the last website I want to mention is the state's COVID-19 information resource page, arizonatogether.org. So just have a couple quick updates. First, you'll notice that the PPP closed on May 31st. So if you did not get your application into the SBA system by the end of the day yesterday, it is not available to apply any further. The banks have the next month to work it through the SBA system. So those that got into the SBA system over the last few days will still be able to potentially get some PPP funding. Additionally, the SBA has updated the EIDL advance information. This is a link to their website talking about those changes, so you may want to take a look at that. With that, let's look at our upcoming sessions. Today, we've got a great session on setting the stage for resilient performance post-pandemic with Nick Tobey. Thursday, we have a great financial forecasting session with our team from the Central Arizona College, Northland Pioneer College, and Coconino Community College SBDCs. And then again, next Tuesday, we have another great presentation by Joe Corella from the University of Arizona. And then on Thursday, another session from our SBDC team on banking and financial ratios for small business loans. So we've got some great multiple sessions coming up from our great partners. We're excited to have them do these series, and we hope you can join us for all of those. With that, we will go ahead and turn our time over to Nick Tobey. He's a Senior Director of the Eller Executive Education at the University of Arizona. Great experience. So Nick, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Robert, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Welcome. How you doing? I hope we're all well. I know it's a Tuesday, but it's kind of like a Monday. So I hope everybody had a wonderful Memorial weekend. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Wonderful. And we'll go ahead and just in the chat, let's get warmed up with chat. 1 for yes, I can see your screen. 2, I can't. So can we just start putting ones in there if you can see my screen? Excellent. All right. So hello, good morning, Amanda. I can see your chat. Just a little bit about me before we begin. I don't want to feel alone in my little office here in the back of my house. So we're connecting in this virtual world. We've got a presentation mode. Chat is going to be the way that we interact and get energy from each other. So please know that we're going to be engaging with chat a lot. So as Robert mentioned, I'm the Senior Director here for Eller Executive Education. What does that really mean? Well, I work with organizations. My day-to-day job is calling senior HR leaders, senior learning and development leaders, senior executives, and trying to help them solve problems through learning interventions, leadership development training. So we do a lot of customization of leadership programs, and I am really the first person to help organizations think through their problems, figure out a learning solution, and do the initial design work and some facilitation of that type of training or intervention. So I have an OD background. What does that mean? I have a master's in organization development from Pepperdine. Go Waves if you're out there. And what that means is really I'm interested in change and thinking through how organizations and human beings can really think through the process of change and developing and really trying to bring the human condition inside of our business and help organizations think through what that should look like. So that's a brief summary of me. I also have a background in marketing and sales. So how I came into that world of ODs, I was always in my sales roles, the person that was training people. And I really got interested and passionate about helping people learn and watching those learnings turn into performance. So that's kind of a little bit about me and why I'm where I'm at. And with that, let's go ahead and just dive right in. In the chat, what I want us to do before we begin, let's prime ourselves. I want us to reflect. What's one thing that you're grateful for today? And just tweet responses, little small responses. Family, there you go, Andre. Yes, family. What's one thing? I want you to tap into what you feel about when you think of what you're grateful for. Family, health. Yes, Barbie. Yeah, absolutely healthy. Absolutely. These are great. And as these come in, as these chats come in, my home, Melinda, yes. I want you to think and read and see these posts from our audience. Grandkids, my goodness, health and vaccine shots, yes, opportunity. Start to get a feeling for what other people are grateful for. It's good data points to think just differently about our population that we serve as leaders, and think about all the things that may be happening amongst the people that we serve. Having my home, life, fun, and sunshine, Anthony. Yeah, absolutely. It's getting a little hot, so hopefully there's a pool mixed in there somewhere. Excellent. Resources. This is great. Keep these coming in. As we start to go through what I'm about to present for you, I want us to experience it. I want us to experience it at the same time. And we're on this format where there's a presentation mode, so we're not going to do any breakouts. We're going to do that through chat a lot. We're going to experience some of these concepts. Iced coffee. Yes, Faith. I love iced coffee. Although mine's a little lukewarm right now, just because it's old. Okay, so let's just keep diving in. One thing I want to do before we begin is turbulence really isn't over. it's the ripple effects of COVID are still going to be, we're going to experience these here in Arizona. The people that you serve as leaders will be probably experiencing these ripple effects. Nurses right now in Arizona are still dealing with COVID patients. I've got a friend who's a respiratory therapist, and her stories are still pretty gruesome about what that looks like inside some of the hospitals. We work with clients all over the world here at Eller Exec Ed. One of our clients is the government of Oman. They just went on lockdown again. So you may have clients, and if you have a global business, that are still in a lockdown and still experiencing COVID as we did several months back. And then just for those people trying to manage families and still work at the same time, there's a lot that is going to still ripple effect from COVID. People, I hear a lot, are languishing, still thinking about their purpose, what their job is, not really feeling connected to their day-to-day. And so there's a lot that's going to happen psychologically with us, especially over the next year or so. But my big key thing here is turbulence isn't over. And I want to acknowledge not only the people that may be still struggling, but it's also helpful for you to acknowledge that as well as you show up in your day-to-day world doing business. It's just giving yourself some pause on the other experiences happening around the world and with your stakeholders. It's just an important thing to do when we start to think about empathy and compassion. An important thing we'll come back to. Okay, so we're going to explore 3 questions. And really, these 3 questions are the goal is just to start to shift our mindset and think a little bit differently about our role as a leader now, and give you some tools that are going to help you develop resiliency in yourself, but also tools to help develop resiliency in the teams that you lead. At the end of this, there's a whole slide with resources and tools to help you continue this journey on your own. What I want to do is spark some thinking for you today. If we do that and we shift a little bit about how you think your role as a leader and what you want to do about it, that's going to be a win in our 50 minutes together. There's a lot of concepts that there's some key concepts that we'll explore around positive psychology that are going to inform us on how to actually take that step as a leader. So what is resiliency? Beyond just a simple definition, how can we develop resiliency in ourselves and our teams? And what is my role in all of this? And that's the key piece. And so like Robert posted in chat, they will be sending this deck to you. So no need to take notes, just focus and engage in the content, have that chat ready to explore, okay? All right, so again in the chat, what I want you to do is just take 1 minute and think about your role as a leader from COVID and beyond. What has COVID done in terms of your role as a leader? Has it changed? And if so, in what way? And just think for a second, tweet-sized responses, so small responses. Let's get some data to the group around the role of leadership, how it's changed. If you could take a minute and just type that into the chat. Yeah, empathy and compassion, Melinda. Yeah, we'll keep coming back to that. That's a key one. And not just empathy and compassion for other people, empathy and compassion for yourself. Having grace with yourself and knowing that it's difficult for you. Helping others change, right? Exercise patience, my goodness. Boundaries, what a good one there. More caution, pushing through. Yeah, these are all really key data points around the role of leadership. It's important for you to think about these things for yourself and how that's changed your role. Focus, important for me. Yeah, serving myself. Yeah, putting the mask on first, right? Conrad, absolutely. Acceptance, Annabelle, that's a very good one as well. I want you to, as you keep thinking about this, keep typing them. You can always keep coming back to this. What I want us to do is start to learn from each other and start to see some of the ways that we've changed. Employee well-being and mindset, Teresa, absolutely. More innovation, yes. Yeah, so how do we innovate? This is a good place to kind of turn a corner. Keep these coming in chat. Keep making sure that we're reading these chat responses. So how do we, what is innovation? How does this connect to all this talk about resilience? When we think about the role of a leader, and this is a key argument that I'm going to make, it's less directive, right? Leadership used to, when we think about leadership in the past, it was more of a directive approach, a top-down approach, right? And really what we're starting to see as the world shifts from this industrial, post-industrial, what they call the fourth industrial revolution, where society is rapidly changing. Technology advancements are shifting the way we do business, the way we live, right? It's more about how do we create an environment that allows our teams and the people that we lead to flourish. And we can connect this to innovation. We'll talk a little bit about that and its connection points to innovation. But really, it's your role as a leader is to build a space for people to come into that space and optimize and operate at the top of their abilities. Okay, and how do we? And I call it a container. I'm going to use this metaphor as container, and I'm going to keep coming back to that metaphor. As your job is to really create this container for people to dig into something that drives their purpose and that really gets them to engage at a high level, right? And so after a scan of all of the research around around resilience, around org behavior, how you get teams to develop and nurture the culture that you want, there's really three things that I think is needed for a leader to kind of shift into this modern role of leadership. And one is this idea of social innovation, right? Thinking of ways that we interact with each other and thinking about the processes in place that provide support and connection. So when you think about meetings that you have, right? I know this happened in our small team here at Eller Exec Ed is when, and I was mentioning this to Faith and Robert when we joined the call earlier, is Thursday, March 12th, 2020. I'll never forget it. It was right when Arizona was going to say that we're about to do a lockdown. Me and my boss on the back of a napkin had to figure out what we were going to do to pivot our business and deliver content virtually and use Zoom, right? And we had to do it in a matter of like a day. And all of a sudden, the next week started, we jumped into our team meetings and we got right into task. We were so nervous about what was going to happen to our business. It was task, task, task. And yet at the same time, in the behind the scenes, we were all experiencing a tremendous amount of emotional and mental things that were happening that were really impacting the way that we showed up and engaged with each other. And it took us a second to hit pause and realize that, you know what? We need to give ourselves some time and some space to connect on a deeper level than just tasks. We need to help each other sort out what's happening because guess what? A global pandemic was really a new stressor for everybody. And so thinking through how we come together and socialize as teams and the processes that support that was a key piece to our leadership within our team. And then this notion of learned optimism, right? Because there's so much change and there's so much negative that could be associated with change is we need to train our brains and help each other train ourselves to seeing the opportunity that happens in crisis. And we can actually do that. We can actually wire the neural correlates in our brain. I'll talk a little bit about neuroscience in a second. We can actually do that. We can learn optimism and actually start wiring connections in our brain around optimism so it becomes more instinctual. And we could support each other by doing that. We're going to talk a little bit about how. And then there's this notion of purpose. The more and more we experience change and turbulence in our world, the more the cortisol shoots in our brain, the more we resist it. We need to also think about connecting things to our purpose and to our values. And the more that we can connect things to our values and our purpose, the easier it becomes for our brain to see opportunities in crisis. So this little pyramid, this triangle, if we think about these three things on the outside, what my argument is you're going to start to notice you're nurturing and fostering more of a resilient container and space for people to come together and practice resiliency and create a climate, right? The day-to-day things that you see and a culture, the underneath the surface values that you don't see in your teams and in your businesses. So Our job is to create this container. That to me is the articulation of the shift in the role as a leader. And it becomes more and more important as the world becomes more turbulent and experiences rapid change. But the key thing here in bold, and this is going back to my story that I mentioned in the beginning of the pandemic, it requires time and space. And I can empathize with people trying to drive to their KPIs, trying to make sure that they hit their performance targets. But when we experience rapid change, turbulence, crisis, we need to figure out a way to provide time and space for this triangle to be explored. That's just a big key aha that you need to think about. As the leader, where are you going to design that time and space? And we'll talk about how we can do that. And I actually give you, at the end of this, a 4-step grid that you can think about planning for building a resilient team. So at the end, you'll have a toolkit that helps you create all of this. So a quick pause in chat. Any thoughts, questions, reactions? What did I miss? Go ahead and push back and tell me if there's anything here that you think is missing. Please put this in chat, because this is a great way for all of us to learn from each other. I'm sure there's a lot of smart people on this Zoom call today, so make sure that your thoughts are shared. There's a question in the Q&A from Faith. Faith, thank you. Do you have a recommended reading list in Resilience? Oh my goodness, do I have recommendations, Melinda? At the end of this, I'm going to give you a whole list of links that you can use. A lot of them are rooted from the Positive Psychology Center. There's a Positive Psychology Center at UPenn. There's a website, positivepsychology.com. There's several scholars that I'll mention. I'll link out to them. There's a couple books in there. This is fantastic. Great question. And thank you, Melinda. Because if you're curious about resilience, there's a lot that you can unpack here to develop on your own. And so if I've sparked curiosity for you, there's a whole journey at the back end of this PowerPoint deck that you can use with links to continue that journey. Very good. Okay, so what's the deal with strengths? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned these resources. Let's give some context. So Martin Seligman, anybody here heard of Martin Seligman? He's a scholar out of UPenn, a psychology scholar. And this is back several decades ago. This is before the 2000s. He was at UPenn. He was doing some research. And he looked at some 44,000 articles in the research center around psychology. And 99% were all around negative human traits, right? Anger, fear, worrying, right? All of these negative behaviors and traits about the human mind. That was what was the dominant study within psychology. And he sat there and said, well, who's researching how human beings flourish? And it was only like 1% of the research dedicated to studying what gets people to operate at a high level. And that was a key seminal moment about a couple decades ago. And it really created this movement within psychology around positive psychology. And there's a whole bunch now of scholars that have come since that movement that have really studied a lot about just how do we get human beings and how do we get our brains to think about change in a positive way? How do we understand our strengths and leverage those strengths to get us to flourish? And so this is a key kind of foundation and context for some of the concepts and principles we're going to introduce. So any thoughts, questions, reactions about positive psychology, please put them in the questions and I'll do my best to address them. So we're getting into psychology. We're talking about positive psychology, where this all came from and why. And let's just touch upon the neuroscience and what's happening in the brain. And if anybody's ever heard of the SCARF model, that's a very popular model being delivered today from David Rock, who studied some 30-something neuroscientists and came up with this model that really helps people understand what happens to the brain when we experience change, what gets us to remove the cortisol reaction in our brain and actually promote the dopamine effect in our brain and get people to move towards the change that we want to seek, rather than moving them away from the change and experiencing some type of negative reaction, right? But really, what the SCARF model helps us illuminate is this power of the brain around neuroplasticity. And really all this means is that what wires together fires together. So if we're constantly on our screens, right, we go to our favorite news station, then we go to our phone and we looked at our social media apps, and we go from screen to screen to screen. Behind those screens, there's hundreds of engineers wanting your attention. What do you think they want you? How do you think they're hooking your attention? Is it because of all these positive stories that are occurring? Well, no, it's around fear and outrage. And these are the business models that are typically used to get you to focus on your screen. And what ends up happening is over time, we go from one doom and gloom to the next. And what's happening is we're actually wiring our brain to experience the world this way. So when we step out of our house, we automatically now have an amygdala, a fight or flight mode triggered on certain things that really don't justify our fight or flight response. And my point is this is happening across an entire society of people. And we know this because it's evident in our day-to-day. We know that we're getting wired to be outraged, right? So what happens is we start to wire our brain this way, and yet that's a choice that we make. And I'm going to argue with you today that we all have choices that we can make to rewire and reprogram our brain to see the positive side of things, or to see the opportunity when we have crisis. And that's just something that is just a key thing to understand for ourselves, and as you lead other people, is that the rewiring of our brain is completely possible. And it requires some discipline, some habit, and some know-how, and some leadership. But we can actually start to unlock this a little bit. Any thoughts, reactions, questions to what I'm saying? Please post them in chat. Any ways that this has kind of come to life for you in your day-to-day, please go ahead and post these in chat. And so let's kind of now that we've understood what's happening in our brain, let's understand now how we can switch this, how we can turn that corner. And so when we think of resilience, right, let's just get a simple definition. We talked a little bit in the chat about innovation. How does this all connect to innovation? But bouncing back, right? Being able to just withstand some crisis, to withstand some negative situations, but then learn and adapt from it, right? So one question I want you to think about, and post this in chat because this is going to tee up our next discussion, is what are the things that you do to stay resilient? What are some of the things that you do in your day-to-day, or maybe not day-to-day, maybe just in your practice, that allows you to bounce back and learn in times of stress? Confront the fear. Conrad, I don't watch the news or read fear-based narrative. There you go. That's a choice you make. Great. Yeah, practicing positivity, Carl. Center of communication. Take long walks, Melinda. Oxygenate the body and the brain. Yes. I try to change my daily routines, even just a little. Get out in nature, Jolene. Big one. Yeah. Talk to someone, Benjamin. These are all fantastic. Eliminate Twitter distraction. Meditate. Yeah, these are all really good. Yep. And your environment, Conrad. Surround yourself with people that are positive. These are fantastic. These are all great. I just want you to notice one thing. Are any of these the same? I mean, there's some similarities, but look how different all these little things are that people do to keep themselves resilient. Yeah, read, meditate, walk, Lola. There it is. Okay, so just let's unpack that beyond the simple definition. It looks like we've got a Q&A. Gary, the attitude of customers is actually more important right now than the tour space trap. Absolutely, yeah. If you're in tourism, the attitudes and needs of your consumers is actually really important. There's some ways that we can apply some of these concepts to your clients, Gary, and make sure that I come back and hit on those when we discuss them, but keep that front and center, because if that's something that you're curious about, how to use some of these concepts to shift the attitudes of your customers, let me know. We'll definitely address those. That's a great question. And Gail Lowe, okay, these are good. Okay, so let's get into unpacking resiliency. Yes, it's common, right? All of us, as we can see in the chat, have some processes we use to stay resilient. It can be learned, right? We can develop resiliency. Well, absolutely. We can actually start to develop change. I am right now trying to lose weight. I've had a little bit of a COVID. I think we baked too much sourdough bread here at the Toby house. But I'm trying to change my mindset around just what it's going to take for me to regularly exercise. And I'm starting to learn some of the things that I do to myself each day that prevents that. So yes, resiliency can be learned. And sugar addiction is real, Michelle. And it doesn't mean that we don't address the sadness and the pain. One of the paradoxes of resilience, and it's a paradox in the sense that it's a trade-offs that need to be balanced, in the sense that on one hand, you're holding on to some of the pain that you experience, but the other hand, you're holding on to the opportunity as well. And that's just really, if we think about resilience, that's what this is. It's kind of having your hand on both. It's allowing that person that has feels the negative pain and putting that self, so to say, that self state on your lap and saying with your wise self, hey, it's going to be okay. Right. And that's just a critical skill in resiliency. And it doesn't, and it's relative to the situation. So, people can be resilient in their personal life and then show up at work and all things go awry. Right. So resilience tends to shift depending on situation to situation. So think about that. If you're experiencing that as a leader, you're more personally resilient, but when you go into work, it's not the same. Interesting. Definitely a data point to sit and reflect on why that could be the case. And yeah, it's complex. Okay. It's a continuum. Resilience is something that isn't binary. It's not either you have it or you don't. You can have a little of it here, less of it there. So just understand that it's really something that isn't like a light switch, that you really just want to foster some of these behaviors and habits and begin to kind of wire your brain this way. And it just takes time to develop. So hunger is the first element of self-discipline. Oh, I like that. Okay. Like building an addition to your home. Yes, these are all great. Keep these coming. So as we saw in chat, what does the evidence say around developing resiliency? Yeah, take a walk, get moving, right? Anytime you want to do a meeting, or if you're in strategy sessions, guess what? If you want to innovate, but what's the first stage to innovation? Creativity, right? Getting aha moments. Aha moments, for those of you, I wrote my thesis around creativity in organizations. You need dopamine, you need oxygen, you need your brain to think that it's experiencing something happening. That's why when we're in the shower and that warm water is rushing down, and all of a sudden we get this great idea, it's dopamine that's happening in our brain. That's what's happening. It's not the water. Although I'd like to say that I like a nice warm shower. So just understand that resiliency gets fostered in many different ways to get it. Someone mentioned talk to someone. My goodness, we need to start building connections and improving the ways that we connect with each other and having some meaning and honest conversation. So these are all things that play a role. Pick a list. I don't want to do PowerPoint karaoke. We don't have much time. Again, you're going to get all of this, so you can go back and look at it. But there's one thing that I just want to nudge everybody to think about it. You've heard about taking deep breaths, I'm sure. But one thing that I think gets overlooked, it's like the the underrated thing here. It's just simply writing things down. You could call it a journal. I don't know if that's too official. I have a journal. So anybody here on chat, a 1, yes, I journal. 2, I don't journal. I'm a 1.5. I kind of check in maybe once a week. Sometimes a week or two goes by. But think about opening up a notebook. Maybe you buy some fancy one at Amazon. Yeah, I see some 2s, see some 1.5ers. Look at all these 1s. This is great. So I'll move quick because it looks like a lot of people journal here. But just there's some tremendous science around just sitting down for a minute at the end of the day or maybe the beginning and just reflect for a second. Sometimes I write down like why I showed up that way. Why when my boss asked me that question, did my shoulders do this and my palms start sweating? What was that about? Right? Give yourself some time to just think about that stuff. As a leader, these are important things for you to think about, because the next day you can show up in a little bit clearer picture about why you're showing up the way you do. And that awareness becomes tremendously impactful when you think about emotional intelligence, how you're being perceived, how you behave, what behaviors you want to foster. So just nudge you to think about journaling. Color by numbers. My wife does that. She has an app for that. It's tremendously impactful for her. Okay, so let's start experiencing some tools. Okay, we've done this a little bit now in the chat, and I'm going to do a little bit of a pause here. So we're at 35 after. We got plenty of time to do this. I want you to think about this question, and I'm actually going to stay silent for about a good full minute, minute and a half. But tweet-sized responses. What has the pandemic made possible for you? Yeah, IV espresso. My goodness, Benjamin. I did get a new espresso machine, a hand-me-down from my brother, and it's fantastic. I drink coffee way too much now. Center myself. Yeah, what has the pandemic made possible for you? Reflection, George. Center myself. Decorate the patio. There you go. Creating spaces for yourself to be either reflective or productive. Yeah, to rethink my approach to life, Teresa. A chance to reassess this, the family time, mindfulness. Okay, so guess what? Evaluate the needs, reassessment. You hear a theme here? More time to exercise. Colin, me too. I go out for my daily walks now in the middle of my day because I have time. Reassessment. Figuring out your place in the world. Existential. Big things. Slow down and prioritize. And Florine, you questioned, you typed a question around balance. Hopefully I addressed that. Balance could be something we put here. Hey, guess what? What do you think your teams are doing? Yeah, your teams are all doing the same thing. How do you know what's happening unless you talk about that? How do you know what's happening unless you give time and space for some of these conversations to happen? Give me the time to come up with more great ideas. Yeah, Annabelle, there you go. Grow my love for wife and family and God. Yes, James, faith, absolutely. Refocus on business growth. There you go, Barbara. So my point here is everybody, it's a theme of, it's not just here in this Zoom, it's everywhere. It's your teams, it's the people that you interface with in your business. Everybody's kind of gone through this, gosh, what's happening? It's a time to reassess. But when we think about reassessment and priorities, we tend to start to think about, well, how do we get people to just show up and perform in this time of crisis? How do I, as a leader, just say, hey, be more resilient? Is it that easy? What's our role to help our teams get through this process that we're all reassessing? We're all having somewhat of an existential type of thought. Yeah, reevaluate. There you go, Brian. Time to create, Amanda. Absolutely. What if I had just asked you, right? Think about the question I just asked. What if I just asked you, why can't we perform right now? What do you think the chat would have looked like? Right? What happened when we started? Yeah, fear. What happens when we start to think about problems? What happens when we start to associate people with problems? And what happens to our culture that we lead and the climate and culture? And I'm going to make this argument that's rooted in positive psychology. So guess what? You've been experiencing some of these tools just in the questions that I've asked and the time and space that I've given you to respond and learn from each other. Yeah, you can become their cheerleader. Absolutely. You can also let them become their cheerleader, Barbara. And it's not up to you. My argument to you is it's not your role to be a cheerleader. It's your role to set a stage and a container for people to discover their strengths themselves. And what we're doing is we're using a type of inquiry to allow that conversation to happen. And guess what happens? Look at chat. I mean, the chat, you look at how tiny the scroll button is, how engaged people are just in this space that we've created together. If we start to think about culture and people as problems, guess what? It's going to create a culture of blame. It's de-energizing. It's not like an operational problem. Culture and climate and resilience, compassion, empathy, human traits, human things that we want to see developed. It's not a widget. It's not a bottleneck in your supply chain. It's not a problem like that. And what happens if, as a leader, if we come into our situation, when I say come into our situation, we wake up, we go on Zoom, we go to the office, and we start thinking about, why can't we just, and it's a human culture problem. It's a resilience problem, or an issue, I should say. And that's the type of approach we make, the same approach we would take to an operation problem. It just de-energizes everything. And it's not your job to solve it. Guess what? You're not going to tell someone else how to become resilient, right? It's you have to allow them to explore their strengths on their own and create a container for this conversation to happen. And there's going to be something that you do with the data in a second, and we're going to talk about what you do when, you know, all of, like, the data that you get from these conversations as a leader. You listen, right? And you think about how you can change and help them continue to grow and develop. So all of this is to say, as we go back to the original slide, that pyramid and creating the container, is when we think about resilience, we think about culture, we think about how do we get people together to operate at the top of their intelligence, the top of their abilities. We need to start creating a culture around those strengths and creating a culture around what is possible. And you can simply do that by just thinking of the questions that you ask and the time and the space that you allow people to explore it, and then what you do with the data after. Does that make sense so far? Let me just pause here, because this is a key thing. Sometimes this can get a little tricky. There's actually a whole bunch of resources around how to use some of these positive psychology concepts with operational tools like Lean, right? I'm going to get into that. So any thoughts, reactions, questions? Okay, I see a Q&A here. As a retail business under canopies for 23 years, I look at the situation. People are still scared, but it's getting better. I've opened up new accounts with suppliers to have to sell better amount of rugs. I must change back to what I sold 20 years ago. Yeah, Gary, I'm not quite sure the question there, but I do see what you're saying in the sense that there's opportunity that's been created and you've seen it from a business context. Is that what I'm seeing? I must change. Yeah, let me know, Gary. I just want to make sure I hit that question and address it, but very good. Okay, any other thoughts, reactions, questions to this? This is the key concept here. Okay, so I've talked about positive psychology. We talked a little bit about Martin Seligman, the whole movement that shaped it. David Cooperrider, very quickly, was someone who studied under Seligman, who was a positive psychology scholar. He wrote a whole thesis, his graduate thesis, with the Cleveland Clinic around organizational culture. And really what he realized was something that the Cleveland Clinic, which is a nationally, globally renowned healthcare facility, obviously in Cleveland. But one thing that makes them so special is when they think about culture and when they think about their people, they have a culture that explores what they do right and they build off of it. And Cooperrider realized through his research is that every single organizational system, every system of human beings coming together has something that's working right, something that's giving it life. And really, in order to get rid of low morale or disengagement or a lack of resiliency, it's not the same as just exploring flourishing. On the opposite side of disengagement isn't flourishing. And that's what he learned. And so if you really want people to dig in, to get excited and engage with their work, to learn how to be resilient together, we need to create that condition for them to explore that on their own and explore their strengths on their own. Why? Because that co-creation, that ability for people to see it in and of themselves is a powerful motivator for people. It starts to wire their brain around what is possible. Okay. And so Cooper Ryder came up with this philosophy called Appreciative Inquiry. It's a positive psychology tool and concept. And really, Appreciative Inquiry is really about acknowledging what has value, to seek what is life-giving, and really to start asking some powerful questions, generative questions, getting people to think about something they're passionate about, like their life, like improving their life, like reassessing what their purpose is, and dig in and inquire about something what might be possible. Yeah, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, in fact, uses Appreciative Inquiry. Yes, Michelle. Has anybody heard of Appreciative Inquiry? I should ask that. We're in presenter mode here, so I can't really ask this. Yes, it's how you think. Yes, Melinda, if you've heard of Appreciative Inquiry, this is great because you can build off of it. Really, what Appreciative Inquiry is, it's a philosophy. It's like a way of being. Yeah, part of the system. Peter Senge, Rachel, absolutely. This is definitely connected to some of Senge's work and some of the concepts, but it's a philosophy and it's a change methodology. So I'll explain kind of how I use this. We focus this in my master's program at St. Michael's. Oh, awesome. Okay, so yeah, in Vermont, in fact, they have a AI center there in one of the schools of Vermont. I'm blanking at the moment. So yeah, so real quick, I was in Costa Rica working with Procter & Gamble. They have a center of excellence type model where for their support, their IT support, a lot of the region's questions and support go through this one center. So we were working with a whole bunch of engineers, and we used Appreciative Inquiry in a full-blown change methodology process, but we also use it as a philosophy when we're thinking about how we show up, how we develop ourselves. When I get my team together and we think about solving some of the behavioral issues that we have, the group dynamics of our team, I use Appreciative Inquiry prompts to get conversation around what is working for us that we can build off of. So really, if you think about it, it's a pretty simple communication tool that you can use in meetings with your teams. It's a philosophy that you can adopt and use for yourself and your self-development. The neat thing is I have a couple books at the end of this that I will give to you. So if you're really interested in exploring more about the philosophy and the methodology, the change process of how you can use Appreciative Inquiry, go ahead and explore those resources. We actually experienced it on the call today. So that's the whole point I'm trying to kind of loop back around to, is there's a reason why we've got chat energized and engaged. We've got peer-to-peer knowledge exchange going on. It's because we're thinking through how we set up the container for that conversation to flourish. And so me as a leader, I can start to see patterns in the data and think about, well, how do I change and shift to enhance my culture that I want to? And it looks like we've got a question. Sorry, it was more of a statement, Gary. There we go. Pick up new products that customers are like, yeah, Gary, this is all about innovation. I think you're touching upon, right, is just this notion of innovation. Gary, where this kind would connect to maybe something we're talking about here is, how do you get the data to know what to innovate? How do you get rich information from your from the people that are on maybe the front lines of that client experience as a leader? So if you're not close to those conversations, you can use Appreciative Inquiry around what's working well for our clients and get some members of your team to explore that. Definitely some connection to innovation there, Gary. I appreciate it. So again, AI started as a philosophy, but it's really developed into a change process. And yeah, a great Forbes article. I can't read it at the moment, but I'm sure it connects somehow to Appreciative Inquiry. So I'm rushing through because we got a couple minutes. I want to open it up for some questions. I want to get to building a resilience plan and using some of the concepts of positive psychology, Appreciative Inquiry to think through kind of the 4 S's, so to say, of building resilience in your team. And this really does tie back to that triangle that we had in the beginning. But if you were to fill these 4 quadrants out and think through the process to get the information to fill these out, this is largely a process of co-creation. And really, why is co-creation so important? It allows people to have some control. It allows some certainty to happen in the change process. It provides some relatedness and connection to what you're trying to do. Resilience isn't a top-down approach when you develop it. You need everybody's voices in the room to tell you and inform you as a leader of what you should think about in order to change, to help your team become more resilient. And I like to think about people and process. So if this conversation today was my team's resilience conversation that I fostered, I can find out pretty quickly in this chat that everybody's going through some reassessment, and that we probably need to take some time and space away from just pure tactics and production to help each other, support each other in that process. Maybe that looks like, because of the schedule, the way it is in your business, and you guys all know your business and what's possible, what's not. Maybe it's creating a little peer-to-peer mentor group. Maybe it's creating some type of resource time allocation at the end of the week just to talk about wins and what's been most successful that week. What are our key learnings? And just really giving ourselves some space to share some of these insights. But if you go around this grid, you start to think about what are the social tools that we need to do to support each other. What actions do I want to take for individually and as a team? What are some of the insights that we can draw when we start to think about what is possible in this time of crisis? Giving ourselves time to reflect on what has been made possible through all of this, and sharing that could be key pieces of strength that your team has that you're not currently leveraging. And so what do we do now with all this information to continuously reinforce these behaviors that we want to seek? And that, to me, is the art by which you develop resilience in your team. Is you don't try to tell them how to be resilient, they tell you. And how do you get them to tell you? You create time and space and use positive inquiry to do that, to get these strengths out. Because I can bet any money that we're not leveraging all the strengths that we can right now. And that becomes incredibly important as the world becomes more turbulent and more situations arise. And yeah, we may not experience a global pandemic tomorrow. We may, but I can guarantee you that AI is going to continuously take hold. Blockchain is going to continuously reinvent the way we do things. I mean, there's change everywhere, and that turbulence is going to be everywhere as we continue to go through society right now. So this grid will be given to you. It will help you frame some of the inquiry that you want to take on with your team, and you can start to fill these grid pieces in to start to think about, how do you want to change people? How do you want to change the processes that support your people as a leader? And that's the role that you play. Okay, so I mentioned, I really want to touch on this really quickly, because if you go into if I've sparked your curiosity about appreciative inquiry and you want to take this PowerPoint, look through links at the end, you're going to come across this 4D cycle. This is the change process methodology I used in that Costa Rican example. So understand that you can go through this process to try to instill a specific type of change. You don't need to do this whole full-blown process to practice appreciative inquiry. You can simply do this in your meetings with your groups and your teams, yourself, as a self-reflection in your journal. But just understand that there's a whole process involved, and there's a whole bunch of resources involved. If you wanted to actually lead this process yourself, you can do it. In fact, the person that invented this has a handbook. When COVID was kind of going crazy there in the last year, David Cooperrider released a 3-page handbook on how to actually implement the 4D cycle with your team. It's included as a link at the end of this. So you have a whole handbook from David Cooperrider himself to do this. But really what I wanted to do today is to just start to shift our thinking a little bit about how do we foster resilient behaviors and culture within our team, and really any type of a culture and climate that we want to grow and develop into. You don't have to really just focus on resilience, although resilience is such a key thing now that I think you should. But the whole key piece is you need everybody's voice in the room. You're not going to go and do a top-down approach to culture. It just doesn't work. It's not effective and it's de-energizing. How do you get everybody's voice in the room? You do it with inquiry. And understand your role is really to create this space for people and to support how resilience can be learned and how to build that process within your operation. And the way that we do it is we set the stage for these conversations to happen. Yeah. Persistence, absolutely. Follow through. Yeah, Florine, absolutely. So what are the conversations you have post engagement when you have this your initial one? What are the processes you put in place to keep that persistence going? So again, our job as a leader is really to create the space for these conversations to happen and use the data to inform how we change the processes that support our resilience in our people. So questions, oh my gosh, it's only 4 minutes. So one thing, as you're thinking about questions, I want one last thing from you in chat. One commitment. Type one commitment to action that you want to take for yourself or your team that helps think about developing and nurturing resilience. Time blocking, write down daily, weekly, monthly goals. Gail, these are great. Conrad, research the 4D. Andre, hit me up. I'll put an email. If you want to know more about how I've used the 4D cycle, please let me know. In 50 minutes, we can't really get to that, but you don't need it. Optimism, yeah. Florine, learning optimism. Optimism can be learned. Take time for yourself. Self-care, absolutely. Give yourself time and space. And Debbie, how do I reopen with COVID still on people's minds in small towns? Debbie, don't ask you ask the people that you serve that question. You can ask them a question around the whole point around what's been made possible is a whole shift in thinking about strengths and reflecting on COVID as what's actually happened, what the strengths of this crisis were, what the opportunities were, and using that data to help shape the minds of the people and your small towns that you serve. You can get them already start to think about what's been made possible and how to leverage that in the future. So Debbie, take that question that I asked and ask them and get them to talk about it and listen and let those strengths that they've shared with you inform you about what to do next to sustain this mindset around reopening and addressing some of the challenges that happen. That's a great question, Debbie. Hopefully I addressed that there. Any other thoughts, questions, commitments that they want to take? I learn more about appreciative inquiry. Well, you're going to have a whole slide deck here. Let me show you. There. You guys see all these links that we have. There's a book on habits, the Positive Psychology Center, the exercises from David Cooperrider, resiliency exercises, a book, couple books. So you'll all have this. One last thing that I'm going to ask of you, and these are all the companies that use Appreciative Inquiry right now. In fact, I don't have Green Mountain Coffee. Oh yeah, I do. Green Mountain Coffee. There you go. Keurig. And so one last thing I'm going to ask you. If you want to connect with Eller, Exec Ed, go to our LinkedIn spot. We post free pieces of information, tools, research-backed stuff on leadership. Check us out. And while you've done that, I'll leave you with a quote. Robert, to you. Sorry if I'm over.
Oh, no, you're right on time. Perfect timing. Nick, this was a great presentation. When you were talking about AI and personally and how you can do it personally, it made me think of the book Strength Finders.
Yeah.
With a whole focusing on your strengths versus worrying about
positive psychology.
Yep.
It's all all rooted from the same domain. There you go. Great. Yep. Robert, thank you.
So everybody, thank you for joining us today. We had a great session, great questions, great interaction on the chat. Well, we appreciate that very much. Nick's presentation was awesome. This presentation will be shared on the website a little bit later today, so you'll be able to access those links, you'll be able to download the slide deck, and then those links should be active in the PDF to go to those websites. And so Again, thank you very much. We're looking forward to a great week this week, and with the next presentation on Thursday morning, 9 a.m. We hope you can join us. But until then, have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Did I do okay?
Did great, Nick. It was awesome.
Okay.
Great
All
presentation.
right. Have a good one. Nice
Thank
meeting you.
too. Bye.